Ci siamo? Inizio. So, good afternoon, and thank you for coming. We have a busy schedule today, a lot of big, very interesting books. So, first of all, thank you for all the authors that are here with us presenting, and of course, thank you for coming. Let's go directly to the first book, which is on Suzanne Pathé. It's by Frank Kessler over here and Sabine Lenk over here. So here's the book, and I pass the word to Frank.
Thank you very much. Well, to begin, I will begin to say just a few words about the manuscript that we've translated, and then Sabine will talk about what you can expect from the book, and I will then just give some comments to a series of pictures that we have for this presentation. So it's more than a decade ago that Stéphanie Salmon from the Fondation Jérôme contacted us and put us into contact with Nushka Pathé, who is the granddaughter of Suzanne Pathé, and she had a manuscript of her grandmother's memoirs, which she had tried to get published in France, but hadn't succeeded. And so we were contacted because a large part of the story that she tells in her memoirs is set in Berlin. And so Stephanie and Anushka thought, well, maybe there is an interest in Germany also for this manuscript. And when we received the manuscript, we started reading, and to be honest, we were also a bit skeptical in the beginning, because as many of these memoirs, they are, you think, well, what's legend and what's historical truth? But we were quite, well, when we started to do some research to contextualize what we were reading, we actually discovered that things she was telling, even so we thought that sounds strange, like the fact that she ran her father's company at the age of not even 15 years, they were actually true. So that was for us a point where we said, well, this is really an interesting story. And so we translated the memoirs, and to contextualize them, we started to do research, and this was a topic where once you start doing the research, you come across so many interesting things. So in the end, it became a book of 500 pages. So we think we can justify the number of years it took us to complete it. Sabine.
Thanks. So, as Frank said already, the book has 500 pages, and we divided it in two parts. The first part is, of course, 150 pages of her memoirs. She tells the story of her life between when she's 2 years old in 1892 up to about 1907, and then it stops. And in the book, in the second part, we will reveal why we think that it stops. It ends without no ending. So in the first part, you see her side of the big Pathé family and what she has lived. We contextualize her text by a lot of annotations to show you why we got confirmation that what she says is true. We give a lot of information on her personal life because she has been a very interesting woman. After having left, not only she has worked for different companies of her father, and Frank will tell a bit about this, but she married a German Jew, she's Catholic. Then they lived a time in Germany until the 1930s, and then they had to flee to France because as a Jew he was threatened by the fascists, and so they escaped on time, last minute a bit. Then they go to Monaco, and probably because her daughter was already in the States, they got probably an affidavit. They end up in the States where they lived until the 60s, where both write a memoir. And when her husband Arthur is very sick, they come back to France. So this to contextualize her life until her death in 1982, you get a genealogy, because there are a lot of people from the film business, from her own family, all the aunts and nieces and so on. You need really the genealogy to know who is who. And we have added a chronology which starts with the birth of the grandfather of the old Pathé, and then of course the descendant, which is Jacques, Émile, Charles, et Théophile, and this goes on until Suzanne's death. So all the important parts are, of course, around 1900 to 1914, where we have discovered a lot of unpublished material. So we give a glimpse of it, and we give you the source where you can check for yourself what we tell is true. Then this is the first part. And in the second part, we explain that the stupid little brother, as Charles more or less presents him in his two autobiographies. The autobiographies were published in 1926 and 1940. When Théophile was already dead, he dies in 23. So it's one of those cases where somebody can't defend himself of being badly treated. So we tell the story of the family, Suzanne Pathé, which is the daughter, Stéphanie Cosson, which is the mother, and Théophile Pathé, and they had not only a distribution company in Berlin, but 3 other companies, and this covers the years from 1903 to 1913 or 1910, when the company stops to being active, and until 1913 when it's dissolved. So this is in the second part what you can expect. So you get the history of the companies, the international cooperation. For those who are from Denmark, he dealt with Ole Olsen. He had his films distributed by George Clooney in the States, by Waterdoor in Great Britain, of course in France and in Germany, because his daughter, and Frank will tell about it in a second, of course they distribute their films as well. We have added a list of films that the company, the exhibition company, has distributed, and I had a help by a very nice student, Jean Moylan, who helped me to find all the American titles of the French and German films that were sent. So we have a list of 246 films, of which 176 films were highly probably made by Théophile himself. And because the company was first directed by Théophile and then by Alexander Bromio, we have 70 more titles under the direction of Bromio when he was the director and played the producer. So to end my little speeches, I want to thank, of course, the Foundation, Stéphanie Salmon, the Fondation Jérôme Seydoux-Pathé, for helping us, giving us access to all this fantastic information on everything that has to do with Pathé. Then my thank goes to Jean-Claude, with whom I had long talks here in Pordenone, walking around and talking about Théophile, Suzanne, and Stéphanie. And last but not least, of course, Nushka Pathé, who really believed in us, we were working 15 years doing research and writing this book. So she didn't lose her patience, and she always welcomed us when we went to Paris. So thank you very much, Nushka.
Okay, please show the first slide. Okay, on this slide you can see Suzanne Pathé on the left and Gertrud Grünspan, her secretary and later also sister-in-law. because what's happened was that Théophile and his family were sent by, and if I say sent, that's already a contested term because a lot of court cases took place in the years to come. He was sent to Berlin to open an agency for Pathé Frères. Now, he thought that he was the official representative. Charles later claimed that he had just given him some money to start his own operation in Berlin and that he was mainly a client for them, but not an official representative. So when in 1905 Pathé Frères opened their own representation, Théophile, who by that time had already also tried to enter film production because he wasn't satisfied with what he got from Paris. He started his own company, producing himself films in Paris, and Suzanne running the company at the age of 14 and a half years, which was possible under German law as long as she had someone who had what's called in German Prokura, that is, who was able to sign contracts and papers, etc. Gertrud Grünspan, just a small side note on her, is also an extremely interesting person who would merit to be studied more in detail. After her involvement with Théophile Pathé, she became the representative of the French firm of Lux in Germany and is often mentioned in the trade press for her skills as a representative. She also she stopped being in the film business in the late teens or in the teens. She got married with the economist Felix Pinner. They emigrated to the United States in 1942 because they couldn't find any professional activity, committed suicide. So there's also a very tragic story here that should be remembered. Can we have the next slide? Now this ad in Der Komet, Der Komet is a fairground journal where Théophile Pathé had his clients for the first years at least. It's very interesting because here you can see a number of the things that are very important in the book. First of all, that the company is indeed called Société Théophile Pathé Frères. And that was possible because Pathé Frères by that time was called Compagnie de Phonographe, Cinématographe et Appareil de Précision, ancienne firm Pathé Frères. So they had given up the name, but obviously they were not happy with Théophile creating a Pathé Frères because he founded that company together with two cousins who happened to be brothers. So he could legitimately say there are two brothers Pathé part of that company. And that was later also the object of a lawsuit, which Théophile lost in the end. There were many other attempts of him to sort of benefit from the name of Pathé. Pathé Frères had their main office in Paris in 98 Rue Richelieu. He had his in 99 Rue Richelieu. He painted it the same color that the facade as his brothers, and he was later, the company was condemned to change the color of the facade. So there's been a lot of that. The other thing, of course, for us was very important when we started to think about, is that really true what she's telling, that here we had the first proof that she was indeed the representative, Vertreter Suzanne Pathé. The other thing which is very important in this ad is that projector, because Théophile Pathé developed, he didn't get enough projectors from Paris to sell, so he had a deal with Oskar Meester in Germany, and they constructed together and had patented a projector, which actually became a very, very successful model, and Sabine tells that story in detail in the book. And the other thing which is important here is that he also distributed Georges Méliès in Germany. In principle, Charles Pathé was aware of that, he was informed about that, but that also became an issue in the trial, because there Théophile was accused of distributing Pathé Frères' competitor. So there's a very complicated story of lawsuits that in the analysis and the study of Sabine are more or less disentangled as far as they can be disentangled. Next one, please. Now here you have a photo from his production company, and we see him sitting there next to Suzanne, who probably played a role in the film because it looks like she is in a costume here with some of the other actors working for Théophile Pathé. And next one. And here's another film, Lettre au bon Dieu, who he had his children play a role. And that's also sort of an aspect of the films that they made. They were indeed, definitely compared to Pathé Frères, a small company, and they had to struggle to get their films out. But there is at least one story that still needs to be verified. That is that Suzanne Pathé tells in her book that her father, Théophile, had engaged a young comedian playing in the comical films of the company, and that man was Max Linder. So she says before having his career at Pathé Frères, he already had starred in some films in Théophile Pathé's production company. We have tried to find definitive proof of that, which has not yet been possible, but maybe will someday. And the last photo, and this is a frame from the film you're going to see tonight, the interesting reading, and the man walking behind the reader is, we think, Théophile Pathé. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions, but before I start, then a question or comment from the public, just asking. Okay, so my first question would be, what was the actual state of the manuscript? Meaning, in which condition was, how complete it was, or to what you can say?
Well, we first received a photocopy of a typoscript, which was complete. It later turned out there are several versions of that with slight differences, which we also tried where it was important to account for as far as we were aware of them in the book. But it's, yeah, it was, she had really completed it, and she really wanted to end in 1907. So it's not like, you know, she didn't finish it. It was really what she wanted to write about. And Sabine suggested that maybe one of the reasons was that after 1907, with the conflicts inside Théophile Pathé and Théophile Pathé's company, and with Romeo, that the story turned a bit sad, and she maybe didn't want to tell that part of the story.
So is this what you think why it was not published or much known? Like, didn't want to become like more, you know, gasoline on the fire? Or is that why it was not as known until today, until now?
Well, there's a strange coincidence. She sells the Berlin office precisely at the moment when her father is eclipsed as director in Paris. So this can't be innocent. And then she goes to Paris, back to her parents, to help them emotionally. because she's very involved, and you will see this in what she has written. She receives letters every day by her parents. She sends letters to her parents, so there's a very close relationship between the child and the parents. So she's totally aware of what's going on, and we have not figured out what was the role by Alexander Promio, who is not a better director because he went bankrupt several times with companies. But this is a story that Jean-Claude should tell because he's a specialist. And I think that it was for her more important to be with her parents. And she knew that she had probably trained Max Löser, who's her successor, in selling films. So there was no use anymore, except because she had met her future husband then. And I wonder how she coped with this. Maybe she sometimes went to Berlin, saw him, and then went to her parents. And of course, when you see her, she's in at least one movie, maybe in more. But because we have only found 15 films, half documentaries, which are probably from the period from Promio, as long as the films don't pop up, we can't tell.
And there's maybe another aspect to that. I mean, first of all, all in all, it was a relatively short-lived company. It was also a company that was founded in a moment where the whole film market is in crisis. I've been looking also at the way the stock market is going in that time, and all the firms have problems, including Pathé Frères, but they have, of course, a completely different kind of backing, and Théophile Pathé's companies, they made also some bad decisions, for instance, to invest in a huge studio lot, which they couldn't really amortize with the films they were doing. But there's another reason, I think, that this story is so little known. That is, for German film historians, Pathé in Germany is a French company, so nobody has been looking at that. And that part of the story was also not known in France because French film historians were, in any event, focusing on Pathé Frères rather than on Théophile. And you can still, I mean, Seydoux thought that Théophile was just responsible for the fairground clients of Pathé Frères. So this is a part of the story that's completely rewritten here.
Well, thank you to both. Thank you very much.
Maybe can I just one
sure.
one thing that is really very interesting to read is her activities in Germany, because she sells the films. She is actually commenting on them. She's lecturing while she's showing the films to her clients, and she's capable of assembling a projector. And she tells this very funny story that it happened that there was a client coming and he couldn't believe that this young girl was capable of assembling the projector, and she shows him how to do it. And then a little later he comes back completely desperate because he doesn't succeed himself in assembling it, so she has to go to him and assemble it for him.
Yet so young, so that's
yes,
remarkable.
Right. Yeah, no, that she also reflects on how her being a relatively young girl affects some of the relations, at least with her clients, and that's a very interesting story to read as well.
Thank you very much to both then. Now we're gonna move to the next book, and we have here, I'm just gonna switch. There we go. Yes. So we have the author here, Elvira. Thank you very much for being here. Le cinéma pour tous et pour tout, which is also a clever name. Well, I have questions for sure. Maybe somebody else will. But just why don't you start telling why and what's the scope, because there is a specific scope of this book.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me. So the book, yes, is called Le Cinéma partout et pour tous, meaning the cinema everywhere and for everyone. It is based on my PhD dissertation that I presented in 22 in Paris, and it was published by the Fondation Pathé at the end of last year. I studied 3 small gauge format developed by Pathé. So you might know them, the Pathé Coq, the Pathé Baby, and the Pathé Rural. I studied them not really from the technical aspect of it, but more of the social uses, how they were used, and the impact that the uses could have. So it's more a social aspect and also the marketing aspect of them. The research is centered on Pathé and on the 3 small gauge that they've developed it because really early on, Pathé understood the potential impact that this kind of equipment could have, economical impact, but also social impact. So they fuel a new market with a lot of equipment and also a lot of movies. Over 3 decades, Pathé played a key role in trying to create a new cinematographic practice, and they also expanded the number of screens that was available all around France. So that was one of the main aspects. That's why I work on that. The period of study runs from the launch of the Pathé Coq in 1912 until the beginning of Second World War in 1939. The fact that I focused my study on Pathé also helped me perceive how an experiment like that by a company that have a lot of experience in film distribution, film production, and equipment manufacturing was what was the strategy and how the marketing was made. And also it was really interesting to study 3 different formats, but all commercialized by the same company and how they coexisted. Was there some competition and was there some difficulty inside the company by marketing them? I chose to left aside the cameras because Pathé also developed cameras for each of the formats I worked on because it was a area of research of its own, the amateur filming, that is no less interesting, of course, but I wanted to focus my study on what I saw as the experience, the common experience that all the users of this projector had. So it was the screening. That's why I didn't work a lot on the cameras. And the overall question I was asking myself during the study was, what were people able to see with these projectors and how and where? So we can slide on the... So most of the archive I consulted was from the Fondation Pathé. I consulted various type of documents. So of course the board meeting and general assemblies of the various Pathé companies that were involved in the marketing of the projectors. These were essential sources to understand the strategies that were made by Pathé. I also reviewed, you can go on the next one. I also reviewed correspondences, internal notes, contract, concession contract, all the materials that shed light on how the projector were used when they were available to the public. I also compare a wide range of commercial material, and that was really helpful to understand what was the ambition of Pathé for each of the projectors. That wasn't the same for each projector. And also, on the next slide, a very important source was the documents that were made for the users of the projectors. So Pathé's publications, such as Le Cinéma chez soi that you can see for the users of the Pathé Baby, and Le Cinéma partout et pour tous for the users of the Pathé Rural, are very interesting because I have a lot of information. It's both informational and commercial purpose. But the information you have on this publication are sometimes unique. For just to give one example, in the Cinéma chez soi, so it was a magazine that was aimed to the people who had a projector, a Pathé Baby projectors. In 28, 31, and 33, the journal published all the places you can buy or rent Pathé Baby's movies in France. So it is an information that was nowhere to be found. So it was really important. And with this information, I made some maps to see where the Pathé Baby were available all around the country. And it was more than 700 different locations. So it was a big information to know how the Pathé Baby were available and at what time, and it in different geographical area in France. So the film, you can go to the next one. So the film catalog for each format were also analyzed just to understand the content of them and also how they were presented to the public. And lastly, I studied the film themselves, mostly 9.5 millimeter, because it was easier to access than the 17.5 or the 28 millimeters. And I had access to the 9.5 millimeter thanks to some collectors, but also some institutions like Princeton University, la Cinémathèque Française, and of course the Fondation Pathé and the collection we have at the Fondation Pathé. So the book, we can go on the next one. So the book is organized in 3 parts, and each part focuses on one main use of the projectors. So the cinema at home, the educational purposes, and also how it was used as a tool for the Catholic Church. Each of these uses are playing a major role in the development on small gauge format by Pathé. I didn't want to downplay some other uses that existed, but I really wanted to focus on those that influenced the way Pathé marketed the projectors, and this is the 3. So on the first part of the book, we can go on the next slide. The first part of the book compares the Pathé Coq and the Pathé Baby, how they were launched. It analyzed their respective catalog and examines their primary use, so the home cinema. It's also in this part that I analyzed the editing of the film Pathé Baby that were available in the catalog. As you know, they were heavily modified, and I studied them. I detailed the adaptation process. And also I pointed some recurring patterns in the editing process, hopefully to help some other researchers if they come across Pathé Baby movies to try to understand them a little bit easier. On the second part of the book, you can go on the next slide, I explored the launch of the Pathé Rural. So the device was designed to small-scale cinema, and its development needed to create a distribution network of its own. So it was a really interesting point to study also. And I also addressed in this part the internal competitions that emerged between the Pathé Baby and the Pathé Rural, mostly because they were both used by the Catholic Church for propaganda usage. And on the third part, and the last part of the book, I examined the challenge that was brought by the arrival of sound cinema in the small gauge format, and also the very important role that all the 3 projectors played in the secular education during all the time frame I was working on. So the book seeks to demonstrate how a new cinematic practice emerged. With this projector, the viewer becoming the curator of his entertainment. The technical innovation were key during all the exploitation of this format. Pathé constantly was improving its equipment to improve the viewing experience. And also I wanted to highlight the value of these films and the importance of preserving them and promoting them, because they are really unique kind of copies and of films. To finish, I just wanted to say, like the small gauge format is a really large topic, even by concentrating myself in Pathé Baby and limiting myself to a time frame. It's really a really large topic. So I wanted to leave and give some tools for potential future studies. One of them is the list that you can find at the end of the book. So it's I compiled original list of films that were adapted in Pathé Coq and in Pathé Rural in France in the time frame I worked on, so between 1912 and 1939. So the list presents for the Pathé Coq around 1,000 titles, and for the Pathé Rural around 1,500 titles. They are designed to help researchers working on catalog studies and help researchers understood the extended circulation that existed of a small gauge format in France at that time. Fortunately, I didn't have to do it for the Pathé Baby because Patrick Moles already did it during 40 years, so I didn't have to do that.
All right, thank you very much. Are there questions or comments from the audience? Yes, the mic. Il microfono, se ci sono le ragazze. Qui, Paolo. Qui.
My question is really, I know about the 70.5 gauge, but I never realized it was called rural. Why was that?
The rural name was given because it was to give a clear way that it was going to be used. The Pathé commercialized this format, the 17.5 millimeter, to enter an area that wasn't at that time really equipped with movie theaters, because the 35 millimeter was too expensive for an activity that wasn't every day, all day, multiple times of the day. So it was called Pathé Rural, just to be really clear of what they were aiming for. Yeah.
Is there another question or comment? Yes.
Thank you. Hello, Elvira.
Hello.
Thank you for this great book that is really important in the field of small gauge studies, obviously. Just a little question. Did you study the end of the adventure? I mean, the moment where Pathé realized that maybe their gauge wasn't going to be the winners, and they began to build 16 millimeter projectors. And I don't know exactly when they begin to release titles in 16 millimeters. That's the end of the 30s, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I didn't really go to the end of the story, because for the 9.5, the venture continues until the 50s, 60s, 70s. For the 7.5 millimeters, I stopped my study at the 39, because during the World War II, in France, the German banned any other small gauge than the 16 millimeters. So that was quite at that moment, but a little earlier, that the Pathé Baby, that the Pathé Rural was adapted in 7.5 and also in 16 millimeters. Another thing that helped Pathé to try the 16 millimeters and not stay only on the 17.5 is what they called the format war. The use of the Pathé Rural in the educational area was a really big subject of debate. And when the 16 millimeter was chosen officially by the French government to be the format, except for the 35 millimeter, but for the small gauge, it was chosen to be the official format used in school and university. So at that time, Pathé had to adapt, and they, at that time, started to do 16 millimeters with the catalog of 7.5. And it was quite a great idea, because during the war they didn't able to continue to use the 17.5. But it was the educational use that determined the 16. Yeah.
Last comment or question? Well, I do. First of all, yes, it's great that you, on top of everything, you focus on Patacoc and Rural, as we were talking some days ago, because 9.5 has been, by now, finally, after a few years though, more studied than before. There's still a lot to say, definitely. But having that plus the listing of the titles is fundamental, I think, for most of the people. So I was wondering how difficult it was to get this list, or how exact, or what was the scope of the list?
So to create the list of the Patacoc and Pathé Rural, mostly I consulted the catalog that were available at that time for the public. So they were mainly conserved in the Fondation Pathé. And also I crossed over some multiple catalogs. And I also had a lot of information in the Cinéma partout et pour tous. Because on every numero they presented the new movies that were available on the catalog, so it's like a crossover of multiple source. The thing that was difficult sometimes, you'll see if you read the book, yeah, there are some titles that are non-identified, because like in the 9.5 millimeters, sometimes Pathé changed the name of the movies. So sometimes it's not easy to identify them. It was possible when in the review or in the catalog they presented like the synopsis or the main actor, but sometimes I didn't have this information. So the catalog is still is a work in progress. Like it is published like this, but maybe in a few years we will have identified some titles and it will be more complete. But it can be.
But anyway, it's still great.
Yeah.
And the last question is, you were mentioning it before at the beginning, but I would like you to spare a little bit more words on the fact that you focus on the distribution part, which is, of course, fundamental. And sometimes we forget about it, like saying, well, it's great that we have these movies, but who are watching it and how they're presenting to the public, because in this case, it was not, oh, well, I will go to a theater and this is what I found, is the completely way around there. So I will either to get the equipment and then present it to the audience, but anyway, it's completely different ideas of distribution also. Yeah.
For the Pathé Baby, there are different things that it was something that for us now is really simple. We have movies, we choose them, we project them at home. At that time, they had to create the habit of doing that. So there was a really big advertising campaign at the launch of the Pathé Baby. So the object and the fact that people were able to project at home was something that it was common, like it was something they know that was possible. So the distribution was, as I said, really big for the Pathé Baby in France, more than 700 locations that you can find them. You can buy the movies or rent them. So it was a really big ecosystem that was made. And for the Pathé Rural, it was quite different, because so they had to create a network of distribution, and it was made in parallel of what Pathé was already doing in 35 millimeters. So they used the infrastructure that they already have, like across France, you have some Pathé Cinéma bureau, and they were furnishing some in one area all the movies in 35 millimeters. So they used these offices for the 7.5 millimeters, but with their own rhythm and their own copy, of course. And for the Pathé Rural, there was even two distribution network, because there was the copies for the small cinema in the rural area, in the campaign, but there was also the distribution network for the church, for the, I don't know how to say in English, salle de patronage. There was places, there was a lot of screening, and it was really important for Pathé to have this venues to the commercialization of the format. So they have, but it wasn't the same print, because there was even the 7.5 millimeter was censored. for the Catholic Church, that was even more censored. So there was two distribution network for the 17.5 millimeters, and that's something very interesting.
It is, because that means they had to have a bigger idea and clearer idea, and considering Pathé was also making movies. So yeah, that is fabulous. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
So now we're gonna switch language, because today is the language day. So we're gonna use as much as we can. So we have with us Jean-Claude, who's going to talk about this beautiful, big, and therefore even more beautiful, and of course all the books you will find at the Filmfair, much weighted book about the beginning of Spanish cinema. So Jean-Claude will be speaking Spanish, I will be translating. So also if you have questions, be patient. It will take a little bit, but we will get there. So muchas gracias, Jean-Claude, first of all, for being here. And nos puedes hablar un poco de cómo nació el proyecto. How did the project start and how did the book start?
Grazie mille a Paolo per la traduzione. Antes que nada, voy a ir lentamente para que puedas traducir. Antes que nada, el libro es un proyecto institucional de Filmoteca Española, un proyecto que se inscribe en una serie de publicaciones cuyo objetivo es poder dar una idea completa de la filmografía española.
So first of all, this is it's very important for me to say that this is an institutional project that was done by Filmoteca Española, and also the concept is this would be of many other publications devoted to have a better view of what is the Spanish filmography.
Este proyecto ha cansado a 3 diferentes directores de Filmoteca, Chema Prado hace muchos años, José Choserdá, que recuperó y relanzó el proyecto, y actualmente Valeria Camporesi, que ha llegado al final, o sea que ya no agotaré más, ninguno más.
So this project basically has tired 3 different directors of Filmoteca, the last one, and Jean-Claude promised this would be the last one, and I'm gonna make tire of me and this project as well.
Volviendo ahora al proyecto, es un libro que en realidad son casi 30 años de investigación. El libro empieza poco después del centenario del cine y por razones muy complejas no se llega a concluir hasta este mismo año, concretamente con una presentación en febrero.
So this project, it's a 30 years, basically, research project. It started right after the 100 years celebration for cinema, and it just was finally released and presented this February.
Por consiguiente, yo no voy a contar la historia del proyecto, porque para ello sería necesario escribir otro libro que sería la historia del proyecto.
So he's not gonna write, is gonna not say too much about the history of the project, because for that we will require another book. There will be a big book about the entire project and how it happened.
Y no sé si Filmoteca tiene interés en ese proyecto.
And he doesn't know if Filmoteca is interested in publishing a book about the bookmaking.
Un libro como este es un libro también que permite construir amistades. Aquí están, no voy a decir y hablar de todos, pero es una amistad que parte de las colaboraciones que están en la portada de la película, John Letamendi y más recientemente Palmira González, que están aquí como por voluntad personal, que están como colaboradores, porque sin ellos este libro no hubiese sido lo que es.
So this book is also friendship, creating friendship and connection. And my two co-authors were also part of this project because they were involved. I wanted them to be involved. And again, it's about also friendship and the help that friendship brings.
De las instituciones también que me han ayudado en este proyecto está evidentemente la Filmoteca de Cataluña, cuyas representantes están por aquí, creo verlas, y que también han aportado con toda la generosidad que uno puede esperar en este tipo de proyecto, no solo los documentos o las informaciones, sino su propio enorme conocimiento de los inicios del cine.
So I also want to thank specifically Filmoteca de Catalunya because they not only helped me with materials, photo and documents, but of course by sharing the big knowledge on the subject.
Probablemente el resultado del que yo voy a hablar ahora es también una experiencia personal. En 30 años uno cambia, cambio, no era así en otros tiempos.
So it's 30 years project means also changing, and that means the project has been changing as myself has been changing. I didn't look like this 30 years ago.
O sea que existe un primer proyecto, pero mi propio conocimiento va evolucionando. En 30 años, todos los investigadores saben que uno lo que era hace 30 años era poca cosa. Hoy no soy gran cosa, pero era menos en aquel momento.
So whoever make research knows that as we are evolving, our knowledge is evolving. I'm not saying that now I'm a big thing, but I'm definitely way more knowledge, and I have way more knowledge than I used to have 30 years ago.
Ahora, el proyecto tal y como figura en el libro consta de varias partes. Este libro se sitúa históricamente en un cambio importante. Digamos que pasamos por una parte a lo que era el trabajo antes, digamos, del siglo XXI, con las bibliotecas, archivos, etcétera, y a partir, digamos, del siglo XXI, más o menos, evidentemente, pasamos a otra etapa, que es la etapa que nos permite trabajar con Internet y con otros medios. Con lo cual, este libro, que era en un principio, el primer proyecto eran 2.000 páginas, se ha reducido a únicamente 800 y algunas páginas más, que yo considero una síntesis de un proyecto más amplio.
So each of us know that it's not the same how this project started, meaning of all the ways we can have for research compared to what we can search now, thanks to internet, of course. And therefore, at the beginning, this project was meant to consider around 2,000 pages. Now it's 800 pages. So what I consider this project is a summary of all that.
Por consiguiente, por otra parte, dispongo de un portal internet que se llama el GRIM y que permite completar muchas de las informaciones que aquí, por razones de tamaño, no pueden estar. GRIM.
So I made a web portal that is called El Grim. That will contain definitely more information to what is in this book, because cannot fit all in this publication.
Entonces, ahora, para ser sintético también, el libro consta de una primera parte que es no una historia del cine en España, por razones que serían demasiado complicadas, pero digamos de tipo teórico, sino más bien una mirada hacia lo que era el espectáculo cinematográfico en aquel momento en España, pero que podría valer para otros países, por lo menos dentro de nuestro mundo occidental.
So this is not the history. It's not meant to be a book about the history of cinema in Spain. Moreover, it's a broader view on what was exhibition in that time, or was the impression and the spectacle of cinema in Spain, but can also, of course, be related to many other countries at the same time.
Por eso podría llamarse también enciclopedia, podría llamarlo así, porque a partir de esta primera parte hay una segunda parte que es vocabulario. Me parece imprescindible saber cómo se designaban las cosas en su momento. Esta es la segunda parte.
So there, I consider this book more like an encyclopedia. As a matter of fact, the second part is devoted to be a proper dictionary. So something that you will be looking for naming, having specific technical name that in that time for specific action or objects.
Luego viene otra parte dedicada a la geografía española, a partir de las provincias españolas y con un resumen de lo que es en aquel momento la difusión en cada región. Uno se da cuenta que en realidad, y no solo en España, la difusión de las películas fue muy rápida, la capilaridad, la extensión se hizo a veces en algunos meses y como mucho un par de años.
So the third part is devoted to the geography of Spain, meaning how many and how much you will find cinema exhibition in Spain and in different area and region. And the other thing that is very surprising, of course, is that how fast the cinema spread around Spain and was maybe in a couple of months before there was nothing, there was already exhibition, cinema or screening.
La parte siguiente está dedicada a los protagonistas, a las personas que intervinieron en el mundo cinematográfico sin una jerarquía especial. Allí están tanto los operadores, los cinematografistas, como algunos actores o incluso también feriantes que tenían su barraca en las ferias, fotógrafos, etc. Son como unos 500 nombres aproximadamente.
So the following part is devoted to people who were involved in cinema. There is absolutely no, let's say the list is open and they are all in the same level, because they're not only actors, of course, or directors, but there's also photographer, the exhibitors or traveling exhibitor. So they're all in the same position, and there is something about them as much as possible.
La última parte es la más extensa y, de hecho, corresponde más al proyecto de Filmoteca Española, que era la idea en un principio, un catálogo de la producción española durante esos 10 años. He considerado también por razones teóricas que la noción de producción no tenía un sentido que conocemos hoy. En aquel momento un fotógrafo podía hacer una película, no había una estructura productiva, con lo cual también he integrado las películas rodadas en esa década con el sol español. Las películas Lumière, algunas, porque precisamente había una complejidad para resolver este tema. Es la parte, ya lo he dicho, que corresponde al proyecto general. Es una parte en la cual figuran en un principio, espero, prácticamente todas las películas de las que se han conservado copias y, por supuesto, luego todas las, y eso es un trabajo muy complejo, todas las películas que podían figurar en la prensa española, apartando a veces títulos, por ejemplo, una corrida. No solo hay corridas en España, con lo cual podía ser una corrida en Francia, y eso ha sido un trabajo de selección delicado y probablemente con algunos errores que siguen manteniéndose.
So the last part is devoting to the original idea of Filmoteca, which means a full filmography or catalog of all, as much as possible, movies of the time. You have to also to consider that there was, especially for many years at the beginning, not a production structure. So I try to include as many titles as possible. First of all and as much titles that are still existing, that they are being preserved, but also the titles that were just represented in the press. And of course, it takes a long time to check the press and see, is this a movie, where it happened, where it was shot. And one of the things very important to keep in mind is there is a lot of this movie that was shot under the sun in Spain, which was a technical challenge at the time. Yes. So, are there any question or comments? Before I do have a couple, but is there somebody? Or no? Okay. Yes, please, over there.
Thank you. I'd like to know whether the year 1906 was the beginning of the local cinemas in the later sense, or whether the ambulant cinema still lived on after that time for as how many years, if that was the case.
A partir del año 1896, la difusión, por supuesto, es progresiva y el comienzo es la llegada del cine Lumière a Madrid, pero tenemos ya en el año 96 ingleses que vienen desde el sur, William Short, que llega desde el sur de Portugal, por ejemplo, y habría que hacer un cálculo que no tengo hecho, pero a finales de 1896, con seguridad tenemos cine en Barcelona, o tendría que decir en Madrid primero, pues empezó, en Barcelona, en Sevilla, en San Sebastián, en Zaragoza y una lista que se extiende. La difusión en ciudades menos importantes se debe más a los feriantes y podríamos decir que en 1897 ya muchas ciudades, muchas ya conocen proyecciones cinematográficas a nivel de proyección y no de producción, ¿no?
So it's progressively. It started in 1896. It spread it very fast, and there's not only the Lumière. We know that there is also English filmmaker coming from Portugal, we know for sure that by 1896 we can find it in many bigger cities like Madrid, of course, Barcelona, but also Sevilla, San Sebastián. And in the smaller or not as bigger city of area, it takes a longer time, but not that long, because by 1897, so a year after, basically, thanks to the travel exhibitor, we found already screening and projection in most of the parts of Spain, and mainly projection, of course, not production. Are there more comment and question? Okay, I do have a question. I'll do it in English and then translate. I really enjoyed the part about the dictionary because not only you quote where some specific word that are very interesting. I'm gonna go to one, but when it was first mentioned and used, like iluminar. Hablas de algunos nombres y vocabularios muy específicos y también cuándo fueron utilizados, por ejemplo, iluminar o los grupos cinematógrafos, etc.
Sí. Bueno, el vocabulario me parece muy importante. En cada caso, cada palabra tiene un fragmento sacado del periódico, de un periódico o de varios periódicos. Me parece importante, antes de saber luego, por ejemplo, hay palabras que no existen, film no existe, o la apócope, cine, tampoco existe, es cinematógrafo. Es interesante hacer un análisis, sería interesante hacer un análisis lingüístico de esta evolución de las palabras. Está iluminar, está impresionar, por ejemplo, para realizar una película es impresionar. Rodar llega más tarde, no es una palabra corriente.
So it is interesting in the part of the vocabulary how this word came. For example, there's no word for film. There's no part two as a suffix like cinema, cine. But there are specific words that were used at the beginning and then eventually changed. For example, impresionar. That is, of course, difficult from rodar, meaning shooting a movie. The first use, basically bringing light would be the first idea, and then after that, it definitely changed to something different. So as a second and last, of course, and connecting also to what Elvira said, you mentioned what the church, how the church reacted to cinema and to the arrival of cinema. So I would like you to say a few words about this. Iglesia a la llegada del cine y me gustaría unas palabras más sobre eso.
Sí. Existe un mito español un poco, que dice, en Francia se rueda la película Sortie des usines Lumière, porque es un país que trabaja, En España se rueda Salida de misa de 12 del Pilar de Zaragoza, porque en España son los curas, es la iglesia la que está muy presente. Es demasiado esquemático, como los que estudian saben perfectamente. Tal vez haya alguna. De hecho, la salida de misa era un lugar muy importante porque el domingo las niñas, las jovencitas, se vestían muy bien, con una ropa muy linda, y los chicos iban a verlas a la salida de la misa, no en la misa, y es un espectáculo. La salida de misa es un espectáculo y tal vez un lugar para encontrar a una amiga o una futura mujer.
So there is a common and known myth in Spain saying, oh, the first movie of Lumière is, of course, the exit from the factory, and that's because French is like a hard-working country, while one of the first in Spain is the exit from the Mass, the exit from the church. But it's actually, that would be such an easy answer, and it is, of course, partially true, but we should change the perspective in the sense of getting out of church at that time was in itself a show, because whoever was going there was wearing the best dresses and were very accurate. And so sometimes the people that were already out were just waiting for everybody to get out and see them. So the fact that they choose to just make a movie out of it is because it was already in its way and it was a public show. So thank you very much, Jean-Claude. And now for the last publication, we have here with us Hugo. There we go. So this is a special edition of Synoptique that is devoted to specific topics. So I would like you to tell us a little bit more, and there is a lot more because there's a lot of contributors, which is very interesting as well.
Yes, thank you. I'm here as co-editor, guest editor with my colleague Christian Ballesteri of a special issue of Synoptique titled Teaching Media Archives, which was just published last week. And so first I want to just acknowledge the Giornata, not only for allowing me to introduce this special issue to all of you here, but also for their support in producing this limited edition print run of the journal that was very generously shared with all of the festival's donors. And so I'm really grateful for all of the support and enthusiasm that the festival has shown towards this issue, which I hope it represents a theme that will be of interest to a lot of people in this audience. So like you said, there are a lot of contributors. I think 26 contributed to the main section, featuring 18 articles and essays that all deal with film and media archival education in different extents and capacities. And so I'll sort of try to provide an overview of the contributions a little bit later. But yeah, this issue has been about 3 years in the making, so not quite as long as many of my co-panelists have been working on their books. But the genesis of this project, you could say, started about 8 years ago, when Christian and I were both still undergraduate students at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And Timmy Williams, who I'm sure will be a familiar name to many in this audience, a film studies professor, longtime Domitor president, and just an extraordinary advocate and mentor, sort of asked me if I would be interested in helping with a film preservation project that she and Christian had already started a year earlier. I had no idea what film preservation really was or what an archive was, but I said, sure, why not? This sounds like a fun opportunity to get to be involved in film and interact with these historical objects. And so over the next several years, we were all involved in this preservation project on our campus. That had started with a collection of teaching films, 16mm films from the 60s and 70s that had been used by film studies and art history faculty throughout the university for several years. And then several more collections were donated to us over the course of our project. And so as part of that project, we did inspection, repair, cataloging of these materials. We tried to find ways to incorporate them into courses or find ways to project them as part of extracurricular sort of initiatives on campus. And we also hosted several film festivals, symposia. As we were doing all of this work, we were trying to think of ways to share our story, share our experiences, and that resulted first in a few conference presentations and then a conference panel at the Association of Moving Image Archivists, and eventually in a small symposium that we aptly titled the Teaching Media Archives Symposium. And once we had undertaken all of these events, we were sort of thinking about like, how can we try to reach a broader audience? Certainly there are a lot more people who are undertaking these kinds of initiatives, both pursuing professional education for graduate students who are pursuing careers as archivists, but also doing work by incorporating digital archives or physical archives into general humanities courses, library science, history, film and media studies, art history, and so on. And so we sort of dreamed up a special issue of Synoptique that we approached Synoptique about, and they were very enthusiastic. In 2018, they had previously published a special issue on the institutionalization of moving image archiving and moving image archiving education especially. And so we thought this was a publication that had been of very great interest to us as we were doing our own work at UWM. And it sort of covered the history of the early sort of professionalization programs, UCLA, East Anglia, NYU, and so on. And so we figured we would take a look at sort of the state of the field today. And so the issue is separated into 3 separate sections, which the separation is a little bit arbitrary because you'll find that as you read, a lot of the themes and ideas that are introduced throughout the essays sort of overlap. But we had to give it some sort of structure. So the first section is titled Students in the Archive. Thank you. And as we were dreaming up this issue, we also particularly wanted to include a lot of different kinds of formats, a lot of different kind of writing. So while there are 8 peer-reviewed articles throughout, we also wanted to include thought pieces, syllabi, reflections on teaching, and so that it could represent sort of a broader array of experiences and ideas than the sort of traditional peer-reviewed article format allows for. So just to give a sense of some of the content, Students in the Archive features 6 essays that primarily sort of explore ways that students are already sort of receiving training in sort of archival settings. So Ben Harry, for instance, talks about a internship program for undergraduates that he has run at his university for several years now since the pandemic, where students get a sort of introduction to the whole film restoration process, and they reconstruct films that have been produced at his university, while Kimberly Tarr sort of discusses the internship component of the NYU MyApp graduate program, and the importance of that practical experience, but also being able to reflect on that experience to their students. Michael Marlatt provides an overview of ways that media archival education can be made more accessible for students who may have disabilities or who are neurodivergent, while Taisha Murphy reflects on anti-colonial practice in description. Travis Wagner sort of takes up this theme as well, talking about a project where they taught 2 courses based on materials from a local history project, where materials from this history project were incorporated into both a graduate and an undergraduate information science course. While Paulo Kelki-Usai provides a model for a radically new media archival curriculum that sort of responds to the needs of our current situation. challenging the status quo. In the next section, Archives in the Classroom, the focus shifts a little bit towards the way that archives are incorporated into sort of humanities classrooms, and the way that students who are not necessarily pursuing careers in archives are able to interact with these materials, learn more about archival practice, and get some experience so that they understand sort of the materiality of film and media, and what that process looks like before they're able to study the objects themselves. So Brian Meacham, Marina Hasapopoulou, and David Christopher all provide overviews of courses they have taught or are teaching at their universities, focused on film programming, where students come up with their own exhibitions, internet-based websites or databases or archives where students can share their primary research on these unique materials. And a project Brian Meacham discusses is focused on the students adopting a film as part of their course, which is then incorporated into the Yale Film Archive, and they sort of undertake preservation efforts on that film, which they choose and is related to their primary research. Barbara Filser and Felix Mittelberger discuss the history of the Rain Dance Video Foundation, and the way they've been able to incorporate these materials into their classroom at Seguín, in collaboration with Seguín Karlsruhe. While Marie-Odile Demey discusses the sort of history of television programs discussing that is focused on art or art history, and the challenges to preserving these materials and the relevance of these materials for art historians, and the challenges of accessing them. Chloe Brushwood-Rose and Axel Demas discuss several educational guides that they developed as part of the Canadian Archive Counter Archive project, where these educational guides are geared towards using primary materials that have been digitized by ACA as part of both high school and undergraduate classes. In the last section, Beyond the Archive and Classroom, which sort of shifts the perspective a little bit towards educational, pedagogical sites outside of the traditional university and archival setting. We have an essay by Madhavi Reddy, Aparna Subramanian, and Shruti Hussain discussing the state of the media archival education field in India, or the lack thereof. And they propose ways that we could build a ecosystem where archives and educational institutions support each other so that they can receive local training. Patricia Ledesma-Villon shifts the focus to film labs and other practitioners who are maybe outside of the archive, and the kinds of unique expertise they bring to film preservation projects, and how a broader view of film preservation that sort of encompasses the kinds of skills, including projection, and film developing and so on, that are typically not included in either MLIS or some film preservation programs, could be sort of incorporated into the archival world more helpfully. Next, Luisa Goncalves and Lucas Larriera discuss a project where they're using FFmpeg to do linear digital editing in order to help students get a better grasp of the original materials that they're working with, in order to provide a lossless workflow, and also to sort of give students a better sense of the kinds of interventions that they're making themselves into the material instead of having them hidden behind GUIs and editing software. Nicholas Kaluda talks about the public library and the way that public libraries can become sites of media preservation literacy through public programming, where film prints and other kinds of materials can be incorporated into the sort of regular programming of the library in order to help raise awareness about media preservation more broadly to audiences who may not otherwise be familiar with these kinds of issues. And Petra Totten provides a fascinating video essay and an artist statement about this video essay about the University of Toronto Library, where they reflect on the presence or lack thereof of trans narratives and trans history preserved within this archive. Finally, we conclude the main section with a roundtable led by Nathan Holmes with Oscar Becker, JMS Emberley, Camila Garcia Cabrera, and Lindsay Miller, where they discuss a initiative that is somewhat similar to the project that Christian and I and Tammy undertook at UWM, and so this seemed like a fitting conclusion or bookending to the essay or to the issue. And so the five of them discuss from various perspectives as instructor, as students, and as archivists, the way that they've been able to support this curriculum and preservation efforts at Purchase College, bring us sort of full circle with the student perspective that Christian and I originally introduced in the introduction to the special issue. There's also a dozen book reviews and festival reviews with relevant publications and events that are reviewed in the last section of the issue. But hopefully this quick, or I've tried to be quick, overview of the contents give you a sense of the scope of the issue and the various kinds of interventions that contributors have come up with. And then if you'll advance to the last slide. Like I said, the issue was just published last week and it's available open access online. And either you can go to the link above or you can try the QR code, which works, I think. I'll look forward to hopefully having you read the issue and any feedback will be very welcome once you've had a chance to do so.
Thank you very much, Hugo. I think we are out of time, but you can continue the discussion close to our office where we always have our drinks, so let her know. Thank you to all the authors that were here, and thank, of course, of all of you. And see you tomorrow for our last book presentation. That will be all in Italian, the language we haven't used yet today.